Testing. Oh my lord, bro. I'm never gonna get used to this. I'm never gonna get used to how this sounds. Okay. Look, I was not planning to jump on the mic today because I got better things to do. But there's, I need to vent. Just Jesus exists or not. And I believe I believe there's the overwhelming evidence over it. Jesus exists. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. But I'm jumping on the mic because I was, doing my thing usually, focus on myself. And I was scrolling on Instagram. I have a nice feed where mostly gospel stuff or some funny memes pops up that I would usually post on my story. But as of a couple days ago, I decided to go dark. Bravo 6 going dark.
Bravo 6 going dark.
So I still scroll on Instagram, but mostly I am taking time for myself. But I decided that today was going to be a different day. And because of this post that I seen on my Instagram feed and some comments between an atheist, I believe, I believe he's just an atheist because he doesn't believe in any gods. But it was an atheist and a bunch of Christians going back and forth on I want to say a theological perspective, but it's more of historic. It was having more of a historic perspective on these things. So they're going back and forth, talking about the evidence of Jesus, whether or not he existed, bringing up the Romans and a bunch of proof and evidence. I believe it's a he. He's saying, nah, that's not proof. That's not evidence of it. There's no evidence. You're not quoting evidence. Everything you're saying is wrong, etc., blah, blah, blah. And then they're still bringing up even more evidence, establishing the fact that, yeah, Jesus existed because X, Y, and Z said about X, Y, and Z. He wants absolute proof. He wants eyewitness testimony that Jesus existed. Documents that we will probably have today to establish the fact that X, Y, and Z said Jesus existed. I was there to see him. You're probably sitting here saying, well, there's definitely a whole bunch of evidence. You have the Bible. He doesn't believe in the Bible. He literally said the Bible is not evidence that the Bible is real. I'm sitting here saying that's absolute baloney. Because if you have ancient scrolls from thousands of years ago with a man or woman that wrote said scrolls saying X, Y, and Z, and then preserved said scroll, then thousands of years later, people dug it up and they're reading it and they're like, oh wow, this person existed. You would probably say that person existed because you didn't write it. Someone else obviously did from their perspective on what happened. That's technically how we know what happened thousands of years ago, because there was eyewitness testimony, people wrote, and documents and scrolls were preserved. So when you're having a bunch of ancient scrolls and texts that are from different time periods, but they all seem to somehow correlate together, it's kind of hard to debunk that, well, all these texts are correlating together. They're all talking about Jesus. Jesus must have existed. Now, whether or not he was divine is more or less is a bit more or less true. Like, some people probably have a harder time believing that he was a divine being, but there's absolute evidence of ancient scrolls and texts. Matter of fact, But like when you have all those ancient scrolls and texts correlating to a singular point about one specific man, and they all just seem to align together, well, sure, you could probably have that posted up in a museum somewhere. That's one thing that you can do. But if you're going to have an intellectual conversation, or if you're going to actually read, if everyone's wanting to read it, it's probably best not to just have millions and billions of people just flocking to one museum just so billions of people can take turns reading it. It's probably better to mass produce said document so that way multiple people can read it. I think that's why we got the first book, which just so happened to be the Bible. That's all I'm saying. Now, it's probably not the first book, but that's me kind of just quoting Jordan Peterson. That's really all I'm saying here. If you want evidence, there's a difference between proof and evidence. What this person wants is proof. And you can't have proof, because proof is the undeniable fact of God. And you can't have that because, well, back in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, you got Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, I believe Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. Then you have 1 King and 2 King. And then somewhere you got the New Testament. I believe it's Matthew. Well, I don't think it was Matthew. Whatever book that Jesus was finally born. I believe that was God's final. Okay, I'm a dip for now. I'm a dip now. Because I'm going to let Jesus take over. Because after that, God didn't establish himself as much as he did back in Genesis and then Exodus and Leviticus and all that. That's kind of when God decided to just be hands off and let Jesus do everything. That's the funny thing about it. You want absolute proof, and the absolute proof that Jesus showed, not Jesus, but what the Father showed, was way back in the Old Testament, and then in a little bit in the New Testament before Jesus was born. What God did back then, the one I like to go to the most big example was Moses. The interesting thing about it is God revealed himself multiple times throughout the Old Testament. Sodom and Gomorrah, Noah, and then Moses. He showed himself bunches of time. Guess how people reacted? Oh man, what was it? There was also, I wanted to say the Tower of Babel, I believe, but I don't think God really did anything. I don't think I read that. I probably did, but I forgot it. Anyways, you have the Old Testament, Noah, Moses, Sodom and Gomorrah, all that. The funny thing about all that is God presented himself multiple times to people, and they all reacted by pretty much giving him the middle finger. So guess how he responds? It's usually death. You had Noah. Everyone ignored God. So they got flooded. Well, more or less. And then you have Moses. You have the Israelites. And that's pretty much the best example of God revealing himself and people absolutely ignoring him and not respecting him whatsoever. He brought, and this is usually the argument where people like to say, "Oh, God supports slavery and all that." No, he doesn't, because it wouldn't make sense for God to literally take people out of slavery and then support slavery. It don't make sense. The math won't math at that point. So, no. This is why context matters. This is why when you're reading the Bible, you have to understand the time period and what people were doing in order to really understand scripture. You wouldn't put modern values on stuff that happened back then. If you had people from that time period come to this time period, they would be absolutely confused by all the things we do, which is why you can't exert modern times back then. So, yeah. Anyways, God took the Israelites out of slavery. Israelites was like, awesome. Now you go into the wilderness, and in the wilderness, they are complaining and they're saying God must not exist, God must not be with us because we're starving and we're not getting anywhere, and they're just complaining. Bro, all this complaining that they've been doing, they could have did all that in slavery. Guess what? They decided to save all that until they were out of slavery, having a sense of entitlement. We did all this suffering, now we deserve some peace. Well, you're going to get peace, but first I got to lead you to the promised land.
Everybody get on the king's back, and I'm going to lead you to the promised land.
But first and foremost, you're going to have to struggle a little bit because we just got to walk through this wilderness. Then lead you to the promised land. They weren't ready for it. They just weren't ready for it. And they did the absolute worst thing they could possibly do. They had the absolute evidence of God. You had evidence after evidence after evidence. Even Pharaoh had to somehow end up believing, to some extent, but his heart was hardened. But eventually he let him go, and then he got killed. Anyways, that's a story for another day. Look, you had every opportunity. You had every sign. You had locusts, you had frogs, you had the sea turning red. You had death come and knock on your doors. Literally, death came and knocked on people's doors, bro. Oh, man. That's crazy. You literally had death come and knock on people's doors, bro. Killing people in the night. Just, a normal Tuesday. And we just say, oh, he must have caught an illness. Anyways, so then you had the sea splitting, the absolute most baddest moment ever of all time. Just the sea splitting, and then it came crashing back down onto the army. Coincidentally, of course, it must have just been a very bipolar racist tsunami that liked Israelites but decided, nah, I think I'm gonna go after the Pharaoh and the Egyptians. I'm gonna kill them. Yeah. Just complete coincidence, Must have been the wind. But yeah, you had all that happen. Got you out of slavery. And we're just sitting here saying, God must not exist. God must be not with us anymore. He must have abandoned us because we're starving. And it's hot. And we're just going through this wilderness, nilly-willy. What I'm having trouble understanding is that the fact that we want proof when God already showed proof back in the Old Testament, we want proof today. I completely get it. That's completely fine. I totally understand. I would like proof too. But proof is the absolute thing. Proof is the absolute evidence of God. And since God already did that, and then they pretty much rejected him, even in the Old Testament, because, well, I'm gonna speed up the story. So they had absolute proof that God existed, everything I just said. And what they decided to do after all that, I believe it was Moses went up into the mount. I think he was writing the Ten Commandments. It was either he was writing the Ten Commandments or he was writing the Ten Commandments, or he was worshiping, both. And when he came back down, people were worshiping freaking cow statues. Golden cow statues. Let me see if you're really understanding here. Golden cow statues. Golden cow statues, my guy. Come on now. Does that really make sense to be worshiping a golden cow statue? When you had all that evidence back then, you're probably trying to rationalize this. Like, okay, well, maybe God didn't show enough evidence. Bro, a freaking sea split. What more evidence do you need? A freaking sea split. Death came in the night, killed hundreds of people, and coincidentally, when people was putting blood on their door, they were safe. But every door that didn't have one, people died. Newborn kids died. All their newborns, including the Pharaoh's newborn, died. All of them just died. Just cold turkey. 6 feet deep in the dirt. Gone. But everyone that had blood on top of their doors, they were fine. They were living. Frogs coming in. Locusts coming in. Armies, like straight armies of toads. Seas turning red. What more evidence do you need? That's not something that happens on a normal Monday, much less a Friday. So what more evidence do you need? If things like that were happening in my life, I'd be like, yeah, God exists. whatever miracles and magic that this guy's performing, I don't think it's magic, my guy. Bro, I've seen some divinations with the Pharaoh's people, but obviously this is another level. You got people dying in the night. Yeah, I'm straight, bro. I'm straight. I believe in whatever God you serving, bro. You got freaking. That's all I'm saying. You had overwhelming proof, bro. Yeah, overwhelming proof. You had. What was it? God revealed what was it? His backside, I believe. He revealed his backside. The presence of God came down on all of them in the wilderness. And they got scared of him. They said, go. I think they told Moses to go talk to him yourself or whatever. We're too scared to talk to him ourselves. Bro, you can't sit here and tell me that they had a hard time believing. No, bro. No, they were too scared because the presence of God came down and they just got scared. It was like, talk to him on your own. And then tell us what he says. So they knew he existed. They knew. And yet they still mocked him to his face, worshiping a cow statue. So this is where people like to say that God condones murder and whatnot. You wouldn't call it murder if it was in self-defense. So, and if there was a death penalty like there is nowadays, where if you do something extremely heinous, like rape, or I probably shouldn't be saying that. I'm about to bleep that out. SA, and well, if you have someone that SA'd or unalived your entire family and whatnot, you would probably be wanting them to do this death sentence too. I'm about to bleep that out too. Anyways, so if you had someone do all those things, and there was a law that says, oh yeah, if you do all that, yeah, you get unalived, bro. So obviously there is punishment for when there is a absolute holy God, and you decide to worship another God that doesn't even exist. Straight blasphemy. That's what we call it. Blasphemy. Just absolute blasphemy. You worship a God that doesn't even exist, bro. After all this overwhelming evidence, after he spared you, even after you was disrespecting him in the wilderness, yeah, you get unalived. Yeah. I don't even think God was the one who commanded it. I believe Moses came down and did it because he knew that's what God commanded. He was just enacting the law because that's literally what they were told. They were literally told not to do that. They knew they weren't supposed to do that. They knew. They did it anyways. Just straight absolute disrespect. So they did it anyways. He was like, okay, you got told the law. You decided to go against the law. So that's what happens. And that's what most people don't like, because they just think that, oh, they did it for no reason. No, they had absolute reason to do it. If you got told the law and you went against the law, well, you get hit with the consequences. Especially if you get told that that's the consequence. If you do X, Y, and Z, you get unalived. But we can have that little debate another day or whatever. So I was just trying to sit here and tell you that there is a difference between proof and evidence. What the guy wants is proof. He doesn't get proof because, as I said, God revealed himself before and people just denied him. They either sat there and denied, they was just blaspheming, or, X, Y, and Z, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Excuse me. Evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. That's the definition of evidence. Proof, on the other hand, is the evidence or argument establishing or helping to establish a fact or the truth of a statement. What you really want to use is the word evidence because it's what's available. We do not have proof because proof is not available. But we do have overwhelming evidence. Proof will just make it a straight fact or truth. But we don't have that. We have overwhelming evidence to support the fact that it's more than likely 9 times out of 10 true. So these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people going up against one person who is mostly just denying or literally just saying that all the evidence that you're showing me is A, not true, or B, is not true. Or he does very little to counter anything that they're saying, which mostly just hints to me that either you really don't want to believe, or they're actually wrong. But something tells me that they're probably right, and you're just denying all evidence because one of them literally said, there's an actual documentary where they're really showing a lot of evidence concerning Jesus existing, and he said, I'm not even gonna watch that. I mean, sure, you probably just don't want to waste your time watching something that is probably, I don't know, more than likely true, that has a bunch of evidence. I don't know. Look, one thing that kind of really got me heated while I was listening to this, or well, not listening, but reading all these comments, was one point that he made. He was saying he likes to use the Bible and take scripture out of context. One example he used was, why would I want to believe in Jesus when he said, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Listen, this guy has shown that he is smart. He's shown that he is smart. He's definitely intelligent. But if you're going to use scripture, understand the context of said scripture. One thing I need y'all to understand about the Bible, here's my other point, whether or not Jesus exists or not, because a lot of you like to just read and then just take whatever is said at face value. The Bible is not for the foolish. This is why we have different translations. So that way people who are, I don't want to be rude, but for people who are not as intellectual, deep thinkers, this is why you need to really understand that context matters, and you need to read the entire passage. You can't take one verse, because if you take one verse, you can just take that and just screw it and just say, oh yeah, this is what it is. No, like how a lot of you say that women have no value, but yet most Christians out here are respecting their wives. Of course, you do have a bunch of bad apples in the bunch, but that's every religion. Every single religion has a couple bad apples in there. And even people who are atheists are still a-holes. And then you just have your normal everyday to day people who are still a-holes. But we don't go around here and say all humans are bad. You don't hear none of us say that. You have a lot of people who do say, man, humans suck. You have some humans that are bad. You have some humans that should probably deserve the death penalty. But you don't sit here and say that, oh, man, all humans need the death penalty, bro. You don't hear no one saying that. So you can't throw a group into the bad apples, bro. Like, the bad apples spoil the bunch, but like, that's not exactly true. You just take the bad apples out, you can preserve the good ones. So you got to look at it from that perspective. And same thing with the Bible, man. You're going to have some things that are going to conflict with you, but the Bible literally goes against every single thing humans want to do. Literally. The Bible literally goes against every single thing that a human wants to do in their life. Like promiscuity, lust, violence. It really does. And we're talking about the New Testament because the New Testament is more so for the modern people, not the Old Testament. The Old Testament was for back then. People back then had to obey those laws. But the New Testament has new laws, or, yeah, pretty much it has like new laws, the way we go about doing things. Because nowadays we can't stone people for being sinful. But God, back then, God had laws adjusted for those people. So he had to make them righteous in their own way because laws were different back then. So that was God limiting his power over them. I'm going to need y'all to do X, Y, and Z. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, this is the consequences. These are laws that I'm established for you according to the time that you're living in. So now that we're in the New Testament, Jesus is saying, this is what you're going to do because this is going to be how this day and age and in the future, you can do all these. Which is why back then, multiple wives was technically condoned. It was tolerated to a certain point. Like, you had multiple wives back then, but that was concerning the fact that, populations of humanity needed to, be populated. Nowadays, we don't need that, which is why it's monogamy, not polyamorous. This is why context matters. So it's interesting how the Bible just takes all that into consideration when you're actually focusing on the Bible and you're trying to give it a chance and not just say, oh, it says this. Obviously, there's contradictions. No, like, it's okay to be perplexed. Like, I get perplexed too. I hear things all the time and I'm like, hold on, what? So I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, we just misunderstood what God was saying. Because, we didn't really, you got to read the entire, you got to read the chapter, you have to read the context, you have to read the book, and you have to be like, oh, this is why God did X, Y, and Z. Sometimes you'll find correlations between one text and then a text that's like later or back then, between the Old and New Testament. There's correlations. It's interesting. But that's besides the point. What I'm trying to sit here and tell you is, yes, Jesus existed. But if you take the Bible out of context, you're going to think that he doesn't exist because there's contradictions. But there's context in the Bible, so you got to understand that if you're going to sit here and say that God doesn't exist, it's kind of weird how the Bible says and tells you laws and whatnot that goes against human nature. And I don't mean human nature as in, the spiritual realm and whatnot. I mean human nature as in everything that people want to do nowadays. The Bible does not condone none of it. Which is why many people don't want nothing to do with Christians. This is why many people say that Christians are judgmental. So where is the overwhelming evidence supporting the fact that Jesus existed? I kind of just named you one, the fact that literally everything in the Bible has nothing to do with what people want to do nowadays. Wouldn't it be kind of, most people would argue that, if God existed, why are we like this then? Like, why can't we just do whatever we want to do and whatnot? it's kind of interesting how like the Bible goes against literally everything that people want to do. I think that's evidence right there that proves that God is a holy God. God is a holy God. He wants what's good for you. He doesn't support your lustful desires. He doesn't support you wanting to change your body just because you feel a certain way when there's absolute evidence that you are what you are. I'm talking to the trans. That's overwhelming evidence right there. That's pretty much, I go as far as to say that's proof. You literally have genitals that literally tells you what you are, and you're sitting here denying that. Like, of course you're going to sit here and deny that God is real. It's kind of, it's interesting, isn't it? And yet we're sitting here having conversations trying to tell you that it's pretty clear that you have a disorder. This is a mental problem, not a physical one. Until you make it physical by taking meds and all that other stuff, drugs and all that. The overwhelming evidence could even be so far as evolution. As far as I know, a life doesn't come from non-life. You don't see humans popping up out of the dirt or anything like that. Life has always come from life. So how are, like, one thing was the Big Bang Theory that's always perplexed me. How did something come from nothing? You get what I'm saying? How did a Big Bang even occur? How's there energy to begin with? A cause had to come from a non-cause cause. So you can't have nothingness and then have something in said nothingness that just created an explosion that caused everything else. Now, that's not logical, especially if you're talking about life in general. You could tell me that, oh, well, we got non-life from non-life. Okay, I guess that makes sense. You have a bunch of energy. That's not life. You have a planet. That's not life. Okay. You got rocks and everything like that. Well, we still have to figure out how the heck that happened. Because you can't have energy in the abyss of nothing. If you have nothingness, then something, then that's nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, if there's nothing, there can't be something into nothing. Because nothing is nothing. It's very complicated. I can get why many of you are probably confused and it's kind of going over your head. That's what I'm saying. You can't get something out of nothing. If it's nothing, then it's nothing. Now, if there is someone into nothing, then obviously this someone has to be outside of the nothing, which is where divinity comes in, because divinity is outside of human logic. But even then, this has some logic, because if there's going to be a somebody where there's nothing at all, it has to be outside of time, outside of space, outside of logic, outside of, well, our limited logic, which would ultimately make sense. Because if you're outside of space and time, then the laws that we know doesn't apply to the divinity. So the divinity could make something out of nothing. And that's where creation comes into play. So that's where the evidence of God kind of comes in. Because it's like, you can't get life from nothing. Because you can't get something from nothing. So there has to be something outside of space and time to create a something and a someone. Because if there is a divine being, that is the best establishment for life. And something within the nothing. To break it down a little bit, to break it down to a more simpler level, is pretty much just life cannot come from non-life. So when there's a planet, on this magnitude and a universe of this magnitude, you can't say that all of this happened from an explosion, because explosions never created anything as far as I'm aware, other than. So what will be the most interesting aspect is, how did all this happen? Let's get to the juice. Let's get to the juice of this. How did a universe of this magnitude come from nothing? You know what I'm saying? So the something can't come from nothing. Okay. So how did a universe come from this magnitude? And within all of this, the one planet that is able to habitate life just so happened to have life on said planet. Where did the life come from? Now you'll probably sit here and say, well, there's evolution. Okay, well, evolution would still have to be able to prove that life can come from non-life. Okay, you with me? Because how did the life form? It can't form from a rock or dirt. Like, the life can't form like that. Life don't come from non-life, my guy. You could sit here and say that, there were animals and stuff like that, but we still have to try and figure out, how did the life form in the first place? You could try and argue with me and say, well, you have the planets and whatnot, and then you have Earth, and then, the trees and whatnot. Well, trees are living too, so how did that happen? Trees are living too. You have vegetables. They're alive too. That's why they die. That's why they get spoiled. The only thing you could probably prove is that there were a bunch of rocks, and then the planet formed from that. But how did the habitation occur? The habitation had to have come from somewhere. Life doesn't come from non-life. So you see how I'm trying to break it down to you, that there has to be an intellectual designer, because designs, you don't get a Tesla from a Honda. That don't make sense. That's intellectual. That's an intellectual level. You don't get a Tesla from a Honda. A Honda didn't just come from nowhere. A Honda didn't make itself. There has to have been an intellectual designer. That's why it's called designer. That's why the brand is called designer, because it was designed by someone. So even if you want to argue that Christianity might not be the absolute religion, you still have to try and come to terms with the fact that there at least has to be a God. With all this, once scientists can prove that life can come from non-life, and they're still trying to make clones and whatnot, well, there's still a designer for that too. They're literally just backing up the claim that life comes from life by making clones and whatnot. Life comes from life. You can create a clone that still has a designer too. The overwhelming evidence that Jesus existed, how many of them are actually worshiping the devil in some shape, way, or form? That's every mainstream artist doing that. You had Beyonce, Rihanna, Eminem, Billie Eilish, Kanye. I believe Kanye did it too. And then you had Lil Nas once again. What was it? What was that guy's name? Ben Shapiro? Was it Ben Shapiro? Who's that one guy? He was the one who did the song Fire on Fire. Sam Smith went on ahead and did it too. I don't know if Rihanna did it. Don't quote me on that. I'm trying to go off the top of my head on how many people really did it. Oh, The Weeknd. He did it too. All I'm telling you is that, I'm pretty sure Taylor Swift did it too. Doja Cat. Was it Doja Cat? I think it was Doja Cat. Bruh, Doja Cat did it too. Wow. Ariana Grande. She did it too. God is a Woman. That's mocking Jesus. And it looks like Doja Cat did it too. And then you have people in the entertainment industry pretty much say that like everything was just demonic and whatnot. You had the Catch Me Outside, how about that girl doing the same thing? She literally turned to Christ. So you can't sit here and tell me that there's not at least some point of evidence for it. She turned to Christ, and then you had another woman who was in the same industry. I think she was doing like Disney or whatever. And then she also turned to Christ. Not to say she was a bad person or anything like that. No, but she clearly was like, yeah, God exists and all these people are demonic. China McClain. There we go. If any of you know China McClain, she also believes in Jesus as well. And she even has videos on her Instagram and TikTok concerning the fact that Jesus does exist. God does exist. She even posts multiple videos, including some quotes from, I believe, agnostic people about the fact that they literally say that, oh yeah, Jesus had to have existed. So concerning the person before who was having a hard time believing that Jesus existed because he wanted absolute proof that could not be provided, eyewitness testimonies and whatnot. Well, we still have historical figures who were clearly credited in their field and line of work. And most of them probably had official documents and whatnot that they could look at. So if they're literally saying that, well, Jesus had to have existed, some of them who are even agnostic or atheists, and they say, well, Jesus existed at the very least, you at least have to believe them to some extent. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna play this, and you're probably gonna ask, you're gonna hear this as well, because she made a video concerning the fact that scientists believe that God exists.
Relativity is what Einstein is famous for. In his calculations, he started to realize that the universe was not eternal. Have y'all ever heard of the theory of general relativity? It's what Einstein is famous for. In his calculations, he started to realize that the universe was not eternal. It had a beginning. Now this leads us to the law of causality. Everything that came to be needs a cause. So Einstein clearly knew that if the universe had a beginning, it needed a cause. Let's go to the Big Bang Theory. There was no space, no time, and no matter before the Big Bang. The universe emerged out of nothingness. What does that mean? Since it's impossible for the universe to be able to create itself because it didn't exist in order to be able to create itself, nature and the universe itself was just a big effect that was caused by, what are we left with? An extremely powerful, extremely intelligent, precise, given the precision that our universe was created with, personal entity that is capable of existing outside of time, space, and matter. That can't be nothing but God. And for people that are like, okay, well, how do you know that it's like Christianity's God? There's only one God. But there's a very famous astronomer named Robert Jastrow. His credentials as a scientist are impeccable. Being agnostic, he's not even a Christian. He said that all of the essential elements of the Big Bang Theory line up with biblical creation. Because this is how God works. God speaks something, and then science runs.
And then it says, and Jastrow is not the only prominent non-Christian scientist to state this parallel. So literally, most other non-Christian scientists agree with the fact that the creation of the universe lines up with the Bible. I don't know what else to tell you.
To catch up with what he said. Science doesn't create anything. Science studies creation. Let me just answer a question that I always get. Who created God? What'd I say? I said everything with a beginning. Everything that came to be needs a cause. God didn't come to be. God is eternal, the way a lot of people thought the universe was until science disproved it. So God doesn't need a cause or a creator. He is the cause. the universe is the effect. Don't just take my word for it. Go look into it for yourself. One more thing. Evidence is not a substitute for faith. Following God is not a matter of evidence or proof. It's a matter of the will. You have to want to do it so you can have the peace that you're looking for. And if you don't want to make that choice, no amount of evidence is going to convince you to. You have to want to.
That is another point that I wanted to focus on. A lot of people are so focused on evidence that they forget the most important fact that in order to believe in evidence, you have to have faith that the evidence is true. And I was also going to touch on this. I can sit here and try to convince you that gravity is real, and all I could really show you is this. That's all I could really show you. I can't really sit here and try to convince you that, oh, we breathe oxygen, other than the fact that I'm breathing, and that's pretty much it. I can show you it, but that doesn't mean that oxygen is true. And I can sit here and try to convince you that gravity is real, but all I can really show you, the evidence of that, is the fact that, well, my pencil just dropped. But you can still sit here and deny the fact that, well, gravity, that doesn't really prove that gravity exists. Just like how I try to tell you that, oh, well, you know, the Bible is true because of X, Y, and Z. You know, I pull out the Bible and I tell you, hey, this right here is the evidence that God is real because it's recorded everything. And all these things comes from the, like, Dead Sea Scrolls and then, and also the scrolls of many people who lived thousands of years before us. But as most people do, they say the Bible can't be the only evidence that Jesus existed. But we still have many other, well, apparently some people don't, well, like the guy that was in the comment section saying that, no, none of them actually said X, Y, and Z, that Jesus existed or whatnot, or they're not eyewitnesses to it. But if you're not going to believe scientists who say Jesus existed, if you're not going to believe historians that say Jesus existed, if you're not even going to believe the fact that there are documents, old scrolls concerning Jesus existed and times before Jesus existed, if you're not going to believe none of that, I don't know what to tell you. I have absolutely no idea what to tell you. Because if you don't want to believe it, you won't believe it. Just like she said. She has plenty of other videos too concerning Jesus and everything. She has, man.
Okay, this is going to be a little bit of a tough conversation that we're going to have today, but we're going to do it anyway. Do y'all remember when I said that there's only one truth and it's not subjective, it's objective, which means it's unbiased and unchanging, no matter how people feel about it, no matter, you know, the people's personal opinions or whatever, it doesn't matter. The truth is the truth and it doesn't change. I wanted to elaborate on that. Now, listen, before I go into this conversation, I want to be very clear about something. So listen closely. What I'm not saying is that if you're an atheist, you are not capable of living a moral life. That is not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. So don't think that. Okay? The point of this video is questioning.
I don't know if I'm actually going to sit here and put up the video so y'all can watch it with me. But just in case I don't, what she just said a few seconds ago, she said that in subtitles, she said that God has put moral consciousness of his law on our hearts. So stuff like murder is wrong, essay is wrong, stealing is wrong. All these things, all these moral consciences of like the laws and whatnot, things that we shouldn't do, like stealing, coveting someone else's wife, and etc., etc. All those things are written on our hearts, which is why today those are things that are not condoned.
What the foundation for morality is, objective morality, without God. Because I was just watching this debate, which is really what caused me to make this video. And I was watching an atheist debater debate a Christian.
Just like this video. That's why I'm making this video.
His name was Peter Atkins. I had to listen to this man say that the only reason why he felt it was wrong for Hitler to kill the Jews in the Holocaust was because he didn't think it was right to hinder people's aspirations or obtrude on their lives. Hitler was doing something that he wouldn't have wanted done to him. No other reason, though. But there's no real binding objectivity to that statement because that's his opinion. There are a lot of Nazis that agreed with Hitler. That's their opinion. And in the atheistic view, are we not all equal as Homo sapiens, that evolution has evolved to where we are right now? There's no afterlife, there's no God. So we're just lumps of matter with no real purpose. There's no judgment, no transcendent justice in the universe. Now, I'm not speaking from my own point of view because I feel it was objectively wrong for Hitler to kill the Jews, period. No matter who you're talking to, what people's opinions are, that's where I stand, going off of the moral law in the Bible. Because what I'm doing right now is I'm taking God completely out of it. I love you, Lord. But for hypothetical purposes, I'm going to take God and say he doesn't exist. I'm going to say my best friend doesn't exist for a second, right? So therefore, everything that has to do with God also does not exist. Jesus Christ being the Messiah, that don't exist. The Holy Book, the Bible, and the moral law that's stated in it, none of that exists. None of that is real. So really, we also have to take the U.S. Constitution and put it over there too, because the founders of the Constitution, what did they do? They formed the Constitution on the foundation of the Holy Book, the Bible. Our very Constitution of the Holy Book, the Bible.
That's crazy, though. I never knew that. The fact that the U.S. Constitution was founded off of the Bible. So a lot of the laws that y'all follow is pretty much based off of that too. Crazy. And y'all still say God don't exist.
Country. That's why on money it says, "In God we trust." That's why we say
we
one
trust.
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's why in court, when you're about to testify and they put you under oath, they say for all.
But the interesting point about that, though, is that might not be Jesus that they're referring to. They could be referring to the devil. Because the devil could be your God. But that's just... Because, listen. It's either you're following God or the devil. That's literally it. That's why Jesus pretty much said when he came down that he did not come to bring peace but a sword. Peace will come later. That's judgment day. The peace will come later. But for right now, he came to bring a sword, to divide, to pretty much put a line in the sand saying it's either me or the devil. Because that's pretty much it. Even if you're sitting on the fence, and here's something I like to tell people as well. You can be in the middle and say, well, I don't really believe in God, or, I'm just having a hard time believing in God and whatnot. You can be sitting on the fence playing devil's advocate, but just like how you're playing devil's advocate, the devil owns the fence too. So if you're sitting on the fence, the devil owns the fence too. So I don't know what to tell you. You got to pick a side. Because God is presenting every opportunity for you to believe in him. Every opportunity. Every time that you're hearing my voice, every time I'm speaking to you, every time that someone else is speaking to you, every time that you're on somebody's story and you're watching their videos and they're talking about God, every time anything like that is happening, he's trying to communicate to you. He's trying to tell you, hey, look, come in close, come in real close, come in real close, come in real close right now. I'm talking to you. That's literally what he's doing. He's trying to tell you that he's here. He's trying to. But so many of y'all are so focused on the absolute evidence, the proof that he exists, that you're ignoring even the minor details of his existence. But we can't sit here and look at the universe and say that this doesn't also mean that he exists. That's what I'm saying. The science doesn't work. Science is just catching up to what God did, so you can't believe in that. But yeah. And this other point that she made, talking about morality and whatnot, yeah. If God didn't exist and the Bible didn't exist and all that other stuff didn't exist, morality would just be subjective. That's literally it. Morality would just be subjective. Murder, thieving, SA, all that other stuff. You couldn't tell someone that that's not a good thing to do because that's just your opinion. Everything would come down to just opinion. there will be no absolute law. The reason why we even have laws to begin with is because the law had to come from somewhere. And I highly doubt that one human or a collective group of humans decided that, yeah, let's just totally agree that these are good laws to follow. Because you would also have a whole bunch of people as well disagreeing with it and then having their own little parties and whatnot, saying that, you know, essay and murder and all that other stuff is fun too, and they're just gonna do that too. They be going to work with each other the whole entire time. I mean, we're one country following pretty much the same set of laws as another country is, and another country is practically doing the same thing. They might have different little differences and whatnot, but we kind of all on this planet agree to some extent that murder and essay is wrong. Thieves, stealing, that's wrong. We pretty much all agree on the same set of moral laws. You can't sit here and say that, oh, well, it's because we've been to war and whatnot and all the evil people are out. No, because you still have people doing it today. So the morality had to come from somewhere.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And whenever anybody says, I do, they are acknowledging the fact that whether they believe it or not, God is watching them and what they say in the next moments that they testify. So if we take all of that away, put it over there and say it doesn't exist, God is just a myth, what real reason do we have to be moral? Because really moral doesn't really exist, not objective morality. What we're left with is really the socially acceptable and the socially unacceptable, because evolution has brought us to the place to where it's socially unacceptable to kill somebody or to rape someone or to abuse little children. That's just socially unacceptable, but there's really no transcendent immorality to it. So really, people could argue about whether or not it's really wrong, because to some people, those things are fine. We still got killers. We still have rapists running around. We still have abusers running around. There are many people that think that behavior is fine. So who are we to really argue with them and say, no, this behavior is wrong, if we do not have an objective moral law to go by? Do y'all see what I'm saying? Same thing with...
In subtitle, she put, you can't use God's moral law to maintain order while simultaneously denying his existence. It's self-defeating. So if God doesn't exist, it doesn't really make sense to use his laws at all. So you can't sit here and tell me that SA, murder, and all the other stuff is wrong. Because that's pretty much what God put in stone in the first place. He pretty much told you that. But you're still going to sit here and tell me that God doesn't exist. Well, dang, where did your morals come from? Because the origin of said moral came from him. Just like how the origin of the human life originates from him. So I also seen this clip on TikTok of this person. What was his name? Jonathan? I believe that was his name. Jonathan something. He's a Christian TikToker and whatnot. He likes to make skits and whatever. Little mini skits. He did this one little skit. That it pretty much is self-defeating to try and make something that God already used, that God already put in place. So if you're going to create life from nothing, you need to get your own nothing. You need to get everything and originate it for yourself. So scientists, get your own dirt, get your own atoms, get your own particles, get everything without it being there in the first place. So matter of fact, get your own planet. Get your own universe, get your own space, get your own time. Because everything that we have now, God had it first. God created it. Matter of fact, get your own body, get your own soul. Do that.
Hitler and the Jews. If there's no objective moral law, how can I really tell Hitler Hitler, what you did, it was wrong, and you shouldn't have done it. How can I really tell him that? Because he could easily be like, well, it's wrong to you. It's wrong in your opinion, but that's just your opinion, and it really doesn't apply to me or anyone else. There are many of my followers that think I'm just fine. I'm justified in doing what I'm doing. So who are you to say that where evolution has brought you is somehow better than where evolution has brought me and all of my followers? Who are you to say that? Wouldn't that be considered as kind of arrogant, actually, to say that without an objective moral law given to us by God? It's dangerous territory. That's dangerous. I'm clearly starting to see in this world where denying an absolute truth is leading us. Just think about it like this. We are teaching our children, okay, don't kill, don't steal or rape or do any of these things. But I'm only telling you not to do it because it's socially unacceptable. There's no God. There's no afterlife. There's no transcendent judgment. There's no self-aware higher being, a creator that created you with a purpose and with love that actually cares about what happens to you. You know, you're just one big accident that the universe happened to stumble and produce. You came from the dirt, into the dirt you will return. But, you know, it's socially unacceptable to kill and rape and do these things. So just don't do them. If there's one thing that kids aren't, it's stupid. At some point they get older and they put two and two together. As soon as life gives them a good kick in the butt, they're like, hold on, what has society ever done for me? Society has never done nothing but hurt me and given me insecurity issues, giving me depression, giving me anxiety. Why should I follow these rules though?
But I had to fake.
Ooh. So everything that she just said, the screen turned black, and it says, here's an example of someone who grew up in a disciplined household, yet still committed many heinous crimes. I'll let him tell you why. It's a documentary of Jeffrey Dahmer.
I didn't feel accountable to anybody. I didn't feel that I had to face what I had.
So if you don't know, Jeffrey Dahmer was an American serial killer. He brutally murdered 17 males, and his IQ is 145.
I didn't feel accountable to anybody. I didn't feel that I had to face what I had done ever.
Growing up, did you feel that you were accountable to your dad or to your mom?
I mean, they didn't let me run wild. They disciplined me. So I felt accountable to them. But afterwards, after I left the home, I started wanting to sort of create my own little world where I could be the one who had the complete control.
When did you first feel everyone is accountable?
I always believed the lie that we all just came from the slime, and when we died, you know, that was it. There was nothing. If a person doesn't think that there is a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges? That's how I thought anyway. The Lord Jesus Christ, I have accepted him as my Lord and Savior. And I believe that I, as well as everyone else, will be accountable to him.
Hi, Birdie.
The fact of the matter is that his IQ is 145. And I believe I read his file of all the things that he did. Every single one. And he was able to come to that conclusion. Whether he believes it or not, whether he fully believes in what he just said, the fact of the matter is that he still was able to put two and two together. Like he has no reason technically to not, you know, he's gonna be in, you know, I think he's dead now, but he really has no reason to lie. He's smart enough to know he's not going to get out of what he just did. He pretty much confessed everything too. So reading his file, he pretty much confessed to everything that he did. So he knows he ain't getting out. He knows he ain't getting no parole or anything like that. So he had no real reason to sit there and lie. So if he's just going to go ahead and talk about his life, he might as well just talk about it. So I don't see a reason why he would be lying to begin with. And he was able to put two and two together. That's crazy. Hey, I don't know what to tell you. If he's able to put two and two together about that, like we all just came from slime, and like what's really the point? Other than the fact that you got other humans here that's just gonna put you in jail or put you on the death sentence and everything like that. What's the point? At that point, you might as well just live the life that you want to live, even if people disagree with it. There's no objective morality. Everything's subjective if we're all just here. Y'all let a murderer figure. Y'all let a serial killer figure that out. But that's proof. That's what happens. That's what happens when you don't have a objective morality in a household. Humans don't count as an objective morality. We don't count. Because we're all just flawed human beings. If there's no objective morality, someone has to be the pinnacle of the objective morality who is perfectly capable, and I do mean perfectly capable, of abiding by all of it, by all the laws, the morality itself. So there has to be a God. Humans don't count because we're all flawed. You have too much evidence that humans are just flawed beings.
Hi, man. I mean, Bird. Y'all see what I'm saying? Society's standards is not enough. There's no conviction.
Notice I never said you need religion to have genuine spiritual conviction. This truly comes from a personal relationship with God through Jesus. That's another thing about religion. You have religion, and then you have Jesus. That's the interesting thing about this, and I'm gonna make that point real clear for y'all. For any atheists, for anyone who's struggling to really understand Christianity, a lot of these other religions out here will tell you you need to be perfect and you need to be abiding by everything in the Bible and everything like that. But what I really want to direct your focus to is you need to have a personal relationship with Jesus. Forget what all the American Christians said. Forget them. Forget your pastor. Forget the church. Forget all that. Because they can easily deceive you. What you need is a personal relationship with God. Read the Bible, pray, and try and develop a personal relationship with him. Try to get to know Jesus. Get to know God. Get to know him. Focus on that. If you need help, that's when you go to the church. If you need help trying to figure that out, you want to establish a nice relationship with Christians and whatnot, cool. Do that. I'm not saying don't do it. Do it, because that's the congregation. That's what the congregation is for, to kind of help to understand the Bible and whatnot. Don't try and have the same relationship that the pastor has with God, because 9 times out of 10, with the way that the direction of this country is going and the world itself, many of them are liars. I'm just outright saying it. Many of them are liars. They don't have no relationship with God. They're just using the church to get a profit. It's just, you will know them by their fruits. That's what Jesus said. You will know them by their fruits. If they're not displaying everything that Jesus is saying, they are not a Christian. They're acting a wolf in sheep's clothing. Get a relationship with God. Build your faith in him. Trust in him. Love to learn him. Not the people. Because the people are not... We, as Christians, are supposed to be the example of Christ. But we're not perfect. And Jesus never said, be perfect, then come to me. He said, come to me and follow me. Don't focus on your sins. Focus on him. And he'll focus on getting you clean. He'll focus on, getting your suit all nice and souped up, dusting you off and everything. Dang, bro, you got this scar. I got you. I'm going to heal this scar. I'm going to heal this scar. I'm going to get you nice and cleaned up and everything. And you're going to be nice and ready for heaven. Imagine that. Imagine a friend just doing that. Dusting you off your feet, getting you some new clothes, helping you out with your wounds, your traumas and whatnot, telling you don't worry about them. I got you. And you're gonna be nice and ready for your next job interview. You're gonna be nice and ready for that house I'm gonna get you. You're gonna be nice and ready for X, Y, and Z. You're gonna be nice and ready for all that. That's what Jesus is doing. He trying to help you out with your traumas. He trying to help you out with everything that you're struggling with. Your scars, your dusty clothes. He's saying, when I'm through with you, you're gonna be good and ready for heaven. All I ask is that you trust me. It's gonna be hard. He didn't say it was gonna be easy. He nowhere in the Bible does it say this walk is easy. He said the path is narrow, meaning not many people are going to go to heaven because of how things are. You see the way the world is turning. Everything's just chaos. People are barely making it by at this point. You could argue that things were easier back in the day because more than likely it was. But nowadays it's easier because we have technology and whatnot. But other than that, paying bills, that's hard. Paying bills, people believing that they're animals and cats and personas and transgenders and all this other stuff. Oh yeah, the path is narrow. It's getting more and more narrow by the day. And that's Satan. But that's a topic for another day. Finish it off here.
Conviction in that, no spiritual conviction in society standards. Actually, we're now in the trend of breaking societal standards. So where is that going to lead us? We want to talk about how far evolution has brought us. It seems we've retrogressed back to the beginning. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, look at China. She's scared about the possibility that she is just an accident caused by the universe itself. And she's not really worth anything. And nobody else is either. And there's no real purpose to this life. All that possibility scares her. So she wants to feel like she's worth something. And so she's telling other people that they're worth something too. Listen, if you weren't worth anything and you were just a big accident, I would tell you that. And I would also act accordingly. I surely wouldn't be sitting down and taking the time to make these videos at the risk of a lot of different things in my life. It's dangerous nowadays talking this openly about God. Do I care? No, because I care more about what God has me doing because he cares about y'all, whether you care about him or not. He's giving you the option through these videos. There's something bigger than this earth and what's happening down here. Moral laws are spiritual. It's not something that evolution caused. Because if we rewind and we did this all over again, we could very well evolve into a whole new set of morals and values. Killing your neighbor might be totally acceptable if we rewind humankind and just do this all over again. Moral laws are a reflection of God's character. I know y'all hear people say a lot, oh, God is good. I say it a lot. God is good. God is good. But it's really the other way around. Good is God. We wouldn't have good without God. And thank God we do have him.
Good is God. That's why, like, some of y'all know me. Some of y'all know me personally. If you say you're a good man, I'll tell you I'm decent. I'm decent at best. And that's just me. That's an understatement. I'm decent at best. Not even. That's me just being generous about myself. Boy, I'm trying to tell you. Listen, she has a whole bunch of other videos like exposing the evil in Hollywood and whatnot. What I'm really just telling you is that none of this is a coincidence. If you believe in coincidences, you're ignorant. Okay, respectfully, of course. You're ignorant. None of this stuff is a coincidence. You can try and debunk all this, conspiracy theory and whatnot. Listen, if you have every celebrity in Hollywood doing weird stuff and we got Keith Williams exposing people too, right? Yeah. So yeah, Cat Williams over here exposing people. Listen, you gotta get with the program. Because if you are believing that Jesus doesn't exist or that there's no evil in Hollywood, you need to catch up. You need to pick up the pace. No pun intended to my song, but you need to pick it up because obviously you're A, choosing to be ignorant, or B, you're just not really in tune to what is happening in the world. And listen, I'm not blaming you if you're just not in tune to the world and you don't really care what's going on. That's entirely that's fair. Honestly, that's completely fair. But obviously there's evil in Hollywood when you have just about every single celebrity worshiping Satan. That can't be an accident. Once it's a coincidence, but when it's like a thing that happens every freaking year, there has to be some correlation as to why. See, here's the thing. You can't have good without evil, and you can't have evil without good. So when every celebrity in Hollywood is worshiping Satan, there has to be a higher power that's good. Not to say that, the devil and God are on equal terms. No, completely no. But you can't have good without evil, and you can't have evil without good. That's all I'm saying. So every celebrity that's worshiping the devil, there has to be a God. Lil Nas, Billie Eilish, Beyonce, Doja Cat, Taylor Swift. Who else? Ariana Grande. Pretty sure Rihanna did it too. You have Eminem, who called himself the rap god, and he even did the little forehead double thing. Matter of fact, Machine Gun Kelly did that too. Called himself the rap devil. The Weeknd, his new song Popular, it's a really nice song. I like it, but it's demonic. Listen, I have it too. I have it too. I like the song. I like the song too. I like the song, but it's demonic. It's literally demonic. It literally telling you what women will do nowadays to be popular. And it's true. Who else? Well, those are most of them. Sam Smith, as I said. Yeah, Sam Smith too. Cat Williams, the podcast he did with Club Shay Shay, he also pretty much exposed all the other evils. What was it? JC, I think Will Smith. Shoot. Kevin Hart. Listen, when you have all these celebrities coming together and just being demonic, it's not a coincidence anymore. Like, you need to wake up. You need to open your eyes. Like if you're struggling to just figure out what God to worship, I kind of just gave you all the proof that I possibly could. There's probably more that I'm missing, but this is pretty much all the evidence I can provide for you. I'm not going to sit here and try to recount everything in the Bible to try and get you to, no, I'm just going to show you what's happening out in the real world, everything that's going on. Because if you're not going to believe, if you can't believe what's in here, you can at least believe that there's an evil out there. Because you can't have evil without good. That's just point blank, period. You can't have that. So I don't know what else. I don't know what other evidence to provide for you. You can probably sit here and ask me like, hey, what about all these other religions? Listen, you could find flaws in every single religion. You can find flaws in Christianity, but you can't find a flaw in Jesus. You can't. You simply can't. You want to talk about Muslims and Islams and whatnot? Bro, I can tell you the latest thing I just learned about them that, like, literally, if I was an atheist, I'd be like, no, you couldn't convince me. you simply couldn't convince me. Bro, everything I know about Jesus, at least when I'm diving deep, but the fact that right there is true, no, I could never. Now, I'm gonna put it like this. I'm gonna put it real simple. For you. And I did the digging to try and figure out whether or not this was true or not. And even the Muslim scholars say it's true and just get over it pretty much. You have most people preaching about this too, and they're literally just saying, yeah, it's true. But here's why it happened. So what it is that, boy, I'm about to open a can. Okay, so look, Muhammad got married to, well, he started a marriage ceremony with a 6-year-old. her parents being the guardians and whatnot, approving it and whatever. I think they got married when she was 9 or 12, and they had intercourse. So there's evidence of it. There's plenty of Muslim scholars, the higher scholars as well, saying that yeah, it happened. Mostly all evidence points to the fact that it did happen. You have some people who are saying it didn't happen, but most evidence that I've seen points to the fact that it happened. Videos and whatnot, most people say it happened. And they say that the reason that it was acceptable back then was because the life expectancy was very low. So you had to get your wives while they were very young. All I'm saying is that even if I wasn't Christian and I was an atheist, you couldn't get me to worship a god or a prophet for that matter, or get into any religion for that matter, if the prophet or the god was okay with that. I don't care what was going on. I don't care about the context. You couldn't convince me, because same things are happening today. The life expectancy nowadays is like at least 80 years old, and yet people are still following traditions like that. Not to be a hypocrite and say like, bad apple spoiled the bunch or whatever, but still, you still couldn't convince me. Not because of that, but just because the fact that it was acceptable for a prophet of a god to do that. He should have been the example saying, no, don't do that. He should have been more of the example saying, no, don't do that, or just not do it at all. That's what I'm saying. You couldn't convince me. That's all I'm saying. Most evidence points to it. I mean, you could probably try and tell the other Muslim scholars that they're wrong, but if they're saying it's true, then I don't know what to tell you. That's what I'm saying. Listen, I don't know nothing about no Buddhism. Catholics, for that matter, well, when it comes to Catholics are literally the closest thing to Christians. But they're so far off. Listen, nowhere in the Bible does it say that you're supposed to go to another priest to tell them all your private matters so you can get forgiveness from the Pope. That is not true. Nowhere in the Bible does it state that you should ever do that. You go to Jesus. You do not pray to Mary. And a lot of weird things happened with the Catholic Church back in the days. Slavery was mostly supported by them. They kind of had their whole foot in it. And yeah. We're not going to talk about the weird things that the Catholics did to little kids, but because once again, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite and say that the bad apple spoils the bunch. I'm at least trying to give you a chance to at least look at every religion, but because Christians did bad things too. You had, I don't know, what was his name? Was it Paul or John? One of them was obviously killing a whole bunch of Christians and then became a Christian the next day. Practically. That was in the Bible. I'm referring to that. But listen, Catholics obviously know, because they don't really, they put, Catholics are like the example of, I kind of just tweaked the Bible a little bit here and there to make it a little bit more my style. Islams are mostly the violent group of the bunch when it comes to, well, if Christians were violent type stuff. Buddhism, you have to look up Cliff, what was his name? Listen, if you really want to figure this stuff out, Cliff, what was his name? Cliff Netchell. You want to look him up. He's a debater, and a lot of his debates with university students, and he even had a podcast with a George Janko, I believe. He did some conversations and debates, and you can learn a lot looking into it. So you can definitely learn something about that. If you also want to look into Christianity a little bit more, then you will probably also want to look into George Jenko. Jordan Peterson is pretty much coming around to the idea of Christianity. I really wanted to touch on that too. He did a real good job talking about it. He has a new tour, I believe, that's coming about, talking about how we all wrestle with God. This is correlating to, I believe, Exodus, where what was his name? Israel. I believe that was his name. Israel wrestled, I believe his name was Jacob at first, but after wrestling with an angel or God, depending on the context of the matter, it was mostly an angel, but we're also saying God in the matter. He pretty much wrestled with God. He had his hip dislocated by said angel / God, and his name became Israel, meaning he wrestles with God. And that's why the whole entire tour is named we wrestle with God, because technically we all do. So with all this evidence that I just provided to you, I provided no absolute proof that he existed. I know, but that's the point. There's overwhelming evidence that Christianity is the one true religion. Overwhelming. But if you still want to ignore it, it's up to you. I don't know what else to tell you. Listen, I could try and convince you that gravity is real. I can even show you how gravity works. But at the end of the day, it's up to you whether you're going to take that evidence and say, yeah, I think that could be my foundation for proof that this right here is gravity. Gravity is real. But evidence, at the end of the day, requires faith to believe in it. And believing in God requires faith. There's overwhelming evidence pointing towards it, but you still need faith in order to believe in it. So that's pretty much it. Make sure you follow God. Stay unfitted.